everybody. Welcome back to Bite Time. Harry McCullough here. We'll spend a little time over the next 3 segments talking with Jerome Zarang, of course, our state rep from District 52. Jerome, thanks so much for joining us, man. Appreciate it.
Happy to be here.
Off season. Y'all don't get any off season. Y'all always got something going on.
Always something.
And that's a good place to start because actually on Monday, you guys go back into a special session. This would have been a little time off, but special session. So what's that all about?
So the intent of the special session, the governor called a session to address the insurance, try to address the insurance problems that we've been having. This is going to be a program to incentivize companies to write business in Louisiana, primarily targeting citizens insurance because right now, a couple things, people either can't afford insurance or there aren't companies writing insurance because of the risk. So the intent is to provide up to $45 million of state general fund, part of which was it's a fund that's within the insurance department that they generate between 15 and 20 million per year that the companies provide that if the state is required to help assist some of the companies, then they'll use that. But if they don't, then it just goes back in the state general fund. So they're going to target those dollars, but plus provide additional money up to $45 million to provide grants to incentivize companies to come in and write insurance.
Is this all in the wake of Ida, or is this because of Laura, Ida, Beta, all the other storms we've been having? But insurance companies, a lot of them have been filing bankruptcy, right?
Right, and I would say it's all because of Ida, but if not for Ida, we probably wouldn't be going in a special session, but because of the previous storms that it's just
the accumulation
has caused a significant stirring in the force of insurance. So
you got numbers of how many people took off insurance companies that left the state this year?
There were 11.
11.
Yes. And the problem we're having, because Citizens, it's so expensive. And Citizens is required, the way it's set up, that they have to charge 10% more than whatever the prevailing policy is in that region. So it's trying to so they don't necessarily compete with insurance companies to give insurance companies an opportunity. It's the last resort. So interesting, before Ida, there were about 35,000 policies written by Citizens. Now there are over 135 policies in Citizens, which is the most expensive and the insurer of last resort.
So yeah, this is something we really want to get taken care of and get some folks in. Now this is not flood insurance, right? This is homeowners insurance.
Homeowners insurance, of which if you have a federally backed mortgage, you are required to have that. And unfortunately, in some cases, the insurance on some of these homes exceeds what they're paying for their mortgage. And some people are just either deciding not to rebuild or can't rebuild because they can't afford both the mortgage and the insurance. So the intent here is to incentivize companies, allow them an opportunity to come in and write business because the big companies aren't writing insurance down here anymore. A lot of, the Foreign Bureaus and State Forum, not to mention any particular company's name, but the fact of the matter is that they've been here, but they pretty much recognize that it's difficult. And it's very risky. So a lot of these smaller companies come in and provide that insurance. Unfortunately, a lot of them went bankrupt after the storm. So there's going to be a grant program that anywhere from $2 million to $10 million will be provided. The companies are then going to have to match that. So let's assume that and I guess the baseline is whatever they request, it can't exceed 20% of their reserves. So that's the other problem, too. You want to make sure, and that was the problem why a lot of them went bankrupt, is they didn't have enough in reserve or reinsurance that when the catastrophe hit, they ran out of reserves and they went bankrupt. So they can only borrow or they can only be provided within this grant up to 20%. So that leaves 80% of reserves that they have to have. And let's, for example, they want $5 million. So if the state of this $45 million, a company gets $5 million from this program, they have to put up $5 million, and then they're required to write twice as much in business. So they'll receive $10 million from the program, 5 of which is their own, but they have to write $20 million. So 5 and 5, 10, they have to write twice as much. That's $20 million in policies. And it has to be 50% of everything they write has to be within the GO zone or a lot of the coastal parishes. Because again, if they come, you're giving them these incentives, they'll say, well, hell, we'll just go right up in North Louisiana, and then where there's a lot less risk. But part of the requirement is they have to be within 50% of those policies have to be within the GO zone or the lower portions of the state.
And it has to be for 5 years, huh?
Right, and so they're required, that's part of the thing, that of the requests, they can only get 20% of that to ensure that their money is going to be paid out over 5 years. So they get 20% to ensure that they stay those 5 years. There's also provisions that if they don't stay the 5 years, then we, the state, can go back and take whatever they, let's say they stayed in for 3 years and used, 50% of it, but then they try to get out of the program, well, we can go back in and collect back what they were invested or what they gave them.
That's interesting. I know you're not the insurance commissioner, but do you think this is going to attract enough companies to come here and do that?
I'll be honest, I wasn't necessarily and still not convinced that this is going to help. I hope that it does, and I think that's the intent.
Right? Yeah.
But it's not a long-term solution. That's the problem. After Katrina, a similar program was established. I think of the companies, there were 6 companies that took advantage of this after Katrina. There were 2 that were left, and I think one of them was bought out by another company, so that doesn't even count, I don't guess. So there's nobody left, essentially, since Katrina. So no one is, I guess, this is not a long-term solution, and no one is claiming that it's going to be. Even the insurance commissioner is not saying it's a long-term solution. But I think it is going to provide opportunities for those in desperate need of insurance, at least to make it more cost-effective.
So let's dust the shoulders off there and talk a little bit about the regular session, right? So a special session will happen on Monday, 7 days.
Yeah.
And then April is when the regular session, and this is a big session because it is a fiscal session. You'll probably have to go in March because
we do, yeah.
Yeah, so you'll have to do appropriations and all that kind of stuff before you get to the regular session. So this will be a busy year for you, right?
Yeah, it will be, especially because it is a fiscal session, which limits the bills outside that are related to taxes or fiscal matters up to 5 bills per legislator, which is, in a good way, it limits what people will do. But it also focuses on addressing some of the critical issues that we need. So the governor is going to submit his executive budget on February 17th. So typically what happens, the Revenue Estimating Conference meets. They put a projection on what the state will be able to budget, what's available for the state. We are going to have a surplus this year. We're going to have a surplus counting the surplus dollars in excess is going to be about $1.2 billion. Now, of the surplus dollars, that can only be used for there's a difference between surplus and excess. So the surplus are dollars that were not used by the agencies or they didn't spend all of their budget. So that's surplus dollars. The excess dollars are what the Revenue Estimating Conference said that, state, you have so much money, but the income, corporate taxes, personal income taxes, sales taxes were more than what was anticipated. So that's excess, so you can spend that in this current fiscal year. Now, the projection for the next fiscal year, that's going to increase another $650 million. So to break it down, we'll have about $750 million in surplus dollars, which can only be used on 6 things, which are defeasance of debt, a rainy day fund, the UAL, the unfunded accrued liability for the retirement systems, and fortunately for us, coastal projects, so it can be used on coastal systems and infrastructure. And typically, the past surpluses that we've had, we've done pretty good here and other places addressing those other issues. But we've gone a long way these past few years in addressing a lot of the debt and using those surplus dollars, not necessarily growing government, but using it for one-time expenses, infrastructure, but also we put a lot to the unfunded accrued liability that we're on a trajectory to get our retirement system in much better shape. And our rainy day fund is going to be in much better shape to the tune of about $800 million. Prior to COVID, we had close to $1 billion in the rainy day fund. That went down to less than $200 million because we had to use it to cover a lot of expenses. We're getting it back up to over close to $800 million in our rainy day fund, which is important so that we always have that in anticipation of some of the budget deficits that are projected after this year. We're fortunate this year.
It's not going to last forever.
Yes.
There's surpluses. Yeah.
We're projected to have deficits of around $200 million next fiscal year and up to $600 and $800 million in the following fiscal year. So this surplus is not anticipated to last.
Right. We've seen it all, and I think the federal government has been sending a lot of money down too. That infrastructure, is that part of what you're saying? Like the latest infrastructure bills and all, does that go into your surpluses and your excesses?
Well, those are federal dollars. So
right.
yes, but it helps obviously
Yeah.
because then we can utilize our state dollars and redirect that to address infrastructure needs. We have close to a $15 billion backlog in infrastructure, roads, and bridge projects that we need to address. And why it got to be $15 billion, it's frustrating when it gets so bad.
Sure.
But the problem is in Louisiana, because of the soils and everything else, it's just difficult to have, and there's water everywhere, so you have a lot of bridges require a lot of maintenance, and the soils themselves don't lend themselves to just, the substrate to keep the roads in good shape.
Yeah, I know you want to build a couple of bridges. One in Baton Rouge would help out a lot for
And
Baton
Calcasieu
Rouge
Bridge.
And in Calcasieu, I saw Biden do a speech in front of it, but I don't see any work going on yet.
Right, and both of them are over $1 billion.
Right. Yeah, those are going to be big. Hey, so there's always some kind of battle that goes on. Of course, you guys hadn't battled much, but having a lot of money. But so what's this year's battle? What are we going to see coming out of there where everybody's, really worried about?
Well, even though we're having the special session to deal with insurance, the special session is specific to the call for just this incentive program. It's frustrating, and a lot of people, and I've expressed frustration, that the governor didn't broaden it, that we could take up other issues. Unfortunately, for better or for worse, he chose to make it specific to this, so that's what it is. We're dealing with just this incentive program. But in the regular session, there's no doubt that insurance will still be a major issue that is going to have to be addressed long-term, because this isn't a solution. This is just a Band-Aid to bridge the gap to where we can get some long-term solutions.
Yeah, but between insurance, right, when you're talking about Louisiana insurance and then FEMA's, flood insurance, between those two, if we don't get some issues, something solved in that, everybody's going to be upside down in their houses down here.
Especially,
they ain't gonna be able to sell anything.
Right, and especially our region. And it's almost a disincentive for people to live down here. And unfortunately, if you want to try to sell your home, if you haven't participated in flood insurance program, or they put some things in place right now, that it's going to be cost prohibitive for people to come in and buy homes. So it's just going to be
that's
an impact the real estate market
to be fixed for sure. And I guess an election year, right, for governor. So
yeah, there is an election year for governor. A lot of the
not
4-year
the guy
terms,
in office running,
and we'll even legislators too. We're all up as well.
So I better watch it. No, it just always makes for interesting politics when there's an election year for sure. So it'll be something to watch for sure. And to see who's actually going to run for governor is going to be interesting. You can only have a few things that you can talk about. So it's very limited in scope. But what more goes on there? And I guess what do one of these sessions, what comes out of these kind of sessions?
Well, every session we're required to balance the budget. So obviously we're going to have a balanced budget that we're going to use this money as best we can to address those critical issues. Again, the point is, with the looming deficits, we want to make sure that we're not growing government or paying or investing in things that we can't afford down the line. I know there's a heightened interest on teacher pay raise. There's going to be more money requested for higher education. Behavioral health, look at children and family services, some of the issues that we had here. There's no doubt that those agencies are going to request additional money. The juvenile justice system, and a lot of things that are going to have to be invested in. But again, you want to make sure that those smart investments, in that we can pay for them down the line, that we don't have to cut them.
Right.
So a lot of it's going to be in infrastructure and roads and bridges, but also we're looking at trying as best we can to address those critical needs.
Why are you already anticipating deficits down the road?
Because the projections, we operate on a 5-year budget, so we have to project what the income, based upon the trends that we do have. It used to be in the past, the days of Edwards and others, a group of guys. Group of guys would basically say, well, we think with oil and gas and everything else, the state's going to make $4 billion. Okay, well, boom, we'll budget for $4 billion. Now there's actually a method to the madness, in so much as they do have economists and they have folks both that represent the administration, that represent the legislature, and an objective independent economist that sits on the Revenue Estimating Conference that looks at all the trends, the income, the revenue, and the projected revenue, and you look at 5 years. And the reason we're going to have, or it's projected to have, a deficit is because some of the things that we've done, both in the legislature, the quarter-cent sales tax is going to fall off in 2025, so that is going to be a cut of about $450 million. 2 years ago, we passed legislation to redirect a portion of the auto sales tax that goes to the general fund is now going to go to infrastructure to address that backlog that I mentioned. Now, that's a good thing, but it also results in less money going to the state general fund. So between those two things combined, within 2 to 3 years, we will have over an $800 million hole that we currently don't have now because the revenue is there, that we will. So we do know for a fact, unless the economy, now, if the economy improves to where we're making $800 million more, then that won't be as big a problem. But some of the things that we've done in the past few legislative sessions in anticipating of that is used non-recurring dollars for infrastructure and used some recurring dollars to address those one-time needs, not growing government, so that reduces the overall impact and the deficit in the budget. So that's going to help. It was projected the previous fiscal year that we were going to have a $400 million deficit next fiscal year, but some of the things that we've done this past session, it's only projected to be $175 million. So we are paying down debt, doing things to put the state in a more sound fiscal posture.
So we don't end up cutting hospitals and higher ed we've done this cycle we've done going up and down. Plenty of money after Katrina, and then we're cutting hospitals 3 or 4 years later. Yeah.
And because, unfortunately, the way the budget is, and we can talk, spend 20 segments talking about how the budget needs and some of the reform that needs to happen, but the unfortunate reality is that we're limited in if we have to make cuts. Let's say we do have deficits. We're limited to higher education, health care, and there's certain things that we can because there's constitutional dedication, statutory dedications and constitutional dedications. That money comes right off the top, and you pay those first before we get to the other needs. So we need to address the budget process, and we're working on that. And we've made some reforms to reduce the personal income and corporate income tax to incentivize business, but also provide relief to taxpayers as well. And we're going to reach some of those thresholds that will reduce that, but there's a lot more that needs to be done.
Yeah. So oil and gas, are we ever going to count on that coming back, or are we kind of moving into the new greener and blue energies?
Well, again, it is projected that within the next 50 years, there will be an increase of over 50% in terms of the energy budget, which can't be met with oil and gas. So alternative forms of energy are going to be required. A lot of people view the alternative forms of energy as competing with oil and gas. That's the furthest thing from the truth, because you will need oil and gas for so many different things. Yes, from fabrics to all additional things that it's required for. So. And I've looked at projections that they do have for oil and gas, and it's pretty much going to remain constant. But in Louisiana, our budget is not dependent on much on oil and gas as it used to be. It used to be anywhere from 18 to 20%. But of the $10 billion that are generated from sales tax, personal income tax, the revenue that the state generates, only $500 million of that comes from oil and gas. So oil and gas
That's
impact,
the one that fluctuated a lot.
Yeah, oil and gas contribution to the state's overall. But now to our region, it's important, and it's very important to us locally, but overall from the budget perspective of the state, it's not as significant as in terms of the contribution that it was.
And I know that there'll be some new, wind fields out there, the LNG projects that are going up in Lacassine and lower, but those won't be up and online to make a difference in the next couple of years.
It's going to help, and it's going to provide a portion, but it's not going to supplant oil and gas.
Yeah, and it won't, not in the immediate future.
No, not in the near future.
Well, Z, have a good trip on Monday, and make sure you get our insurance settled.
And we're going to try.
And then the regular session will come up in April. Jerome Zhang, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. We'll be right back with more Bite Time right after this.